Welcome, everybody. Frank Vespi here, Maryland Racing Today, part of the Mid-Atlantic Racing Today family of podcasts. Thanks for joining us here on our latest episode. Joined here by John Piazzik, Maryland. Try that again. Maryland handicapper for the racingbiz.com, and Mackenzie Pfeiffer, MJC racing analyst. Hey guys, so we got one who's sick and one who's buried in snow. How's everybody doing?
Well, I was saying off the air that I've been a lot better, but I've also been a lot worse. So fortunately, this snow is expected to melt a lot faster than the last big storm did. So hopefully, knock on wood, this will all be behind us, and then we can finally start looking forward to spring, because we have been in very short supply of any spring-like weather this winter.
Yeah, Punxsutawney Phil was right on this year when he told us 6 more weeks of winter. How about you, Mac? You going to make it?
I am. You know, this is what the weeks are for, right? Just catch a little winter cold, get a snowstorm, be back and ready for racing on Friday.
Atta girl. All right. So on today's program, the three of us going to do a little bit of news in a second. Jennifer Kelly, author Jennifer Kelly, racing historian, going to join me in a little bit. And then Mac and John will return and do some handicapping of the weekend's races at Laurel Park here on Maryland Racing Today. But let's start with the news. So we had 2 stakes last week. We had the Miracle Wood for the 3-year-old boys. We had the Wide Country for the 3-year-old girls, the next step towards the Preakness and Black Eyed Susan, respectively. And Mac, let's start with you and Taj Mahal. You and I talked last week on I think Louis Rabeau's podcast. Shout out to Louis Rabeau for having us on. And we both, I think we agreed, but certainly I felt like they were really asking Taj Mahal to do a lot in that race. First time against winners, stretching out from 6 furlongs to a mile, ended up being on a sloppy track, do it all in 15 days rest. He answered all the questions.
Well, and that's really it. I mean, we think about what makes a stakes quality horse, and a lot of it really comes down to the intangibles. So the heart, the willingness, the professionalism, and that's what we really saw on display this past weekend in the Miracle Wood. For me, very different trip. He ends up being a bit more forward. He does tons of heavy lifting early on, takes the pressure, but then, you know, when company comes to him, it's a different position than we had seen. This is, you know, we always talk about you don't want to bet the favorite doing something new for the first time here, but you know, he certainly makes you feel like it was not out of the question and you were well rewarded. Very, very good horse in Let's Go Lando, who has a lot more racing experience, brings it to him every step of the way, but just can't quite put Taj Mahal away. And that was kind of what I came into this race feeling, was they'd done all of the homework to have this one ready. He really answered the question here this weekend.
Yeah, he did, John. He holds off Let's Go Lando the length of the stretch there and closed the gate, who had been second in the spectacular bid, is third there, a couple lengths behind the top pair.
I mean, considering, as you guys said, it was only his second start, that was just a titanic effort from Taj Mahal. He has really moved forward in a very short amount of time, as you guys said, only 15 days rest. Coming back and turning in an effort like that, very, very impressive. I am very interested in seeing what he does next, because I think he could be a very serious 3-year-old. I know these connections have Balboa in the Gotham at Aqueduct on Saturday. So I think a lot of it is going to depend on how Balboa runs. If he wins the Gotham or even comes in second, I think he stays on the Derby Trail and they keep Taj Mahal, at least for now, in smaller stakes. But I can easily see a situation in which Taj Mahal ends up in a Derby prep and quite possibly does some damage.
Yeah, I talked with Brittany Russell after that race, and she wasn't giving us anything. She, wanted to see how the horse came out of it, talk to the team, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll see where they show up next. The next stop locally for 3-year-old boys is the Private Terms in March, and that might be a logical spot. That's a 2-term try. So we'll see what they do. Now, John, it was Brittany Russell Day. Peach Tie gets the money in the wide country. Pretty good effort. I mean, it was a short field, but easily beats Law School, who had already won a stake.
A pretty good effort indeed by Peach Tie, but I'm still quite not sure what to make of her because she's built up a very impressive resume, already a 5-time winner, 2-time stakes winner, and yet, through no fault of her own, she keeps running into these small fields. So it's kind of hard to gauge quite how good she is. That being said, this was a nice effort. As you can see, she sets the pace. Law School, who, as you mentioned, had won 2 races in a row in very impressive style, makes her move at the top of the stretch, and Peach Tie ends up just kind of shrugging her off and winning by open lengths. I would imagine Peach Tie is going to stay on the local road to the Black-Eyed Susan. I don't think her figures are quite there that she could reasonably challenge the top horses in her class just yet. So I imagine that the Weber City Miss is on her date card. I am hoping that she gets a stiffer test sooner rather than later, because I think this is a very good 3-year-old filly. Just hasn't quite gotten her litmus test just yet.
Yeah, she Max, she improved to now 5 for 5 on dirt. Her only defeat came on the synthetic, so she certainly hadn't done anything wrong so far.
I agree with you. And I actually think that Keeneland race we saw from her was a really good litmus test. That's kind of what I've gone off of ever since we've seen her come back here to Maryland, because she's one of 5 horses who went on to win next out after that Keeneland effort. The second place finisher has now gone on to finish second in a solid stakes company over at Oaklawn. I believe the 4th place finisher is also multiple stakes placed as well now. So I do think that is a race where we can argue the smaller fields she's faced recently sometimes can be just as difficult, if not more so. She's shown a lot of professionalism. I've been a big fan of her every step of the way, and so she's one who I'm very excited about coming into this 3-year-old year.
All right, so Peach Tie and Taj Mahal get the money in the 2 Laurel Stakes this past week, and I wanted to talk with the 2 of you. And next week we'll talk about 3-year-old fillies. I want to talk about the 3-year-old boys at this point and get your sense of kind of who the best ones are. Where we are now in the process locally is the 1-turn races are done. Now we're going to get serious. We got the private terms at 1 mile and 16th, then the Tessio in April at 1 mile and 1/8, both 2-turn distances at Laurel. So I think those are going to be a better gauge of sort of who might be a Preakness horse. But nevertheless, I did want to talk with you both about what you think you've seen so far from the sophomore class running at Laurel. You know, John, you mentioned Balboa, who has run his last couple starts in New York. Obviously a little bit different there. We'll see how he does in the Gotham, but he was placed in the Jerome, was he placed in the Withers? I can't remember.
Placed in the Remsen, which has ended up being a very key race, incidentally. We'll see how he does there. But I wanted to focus more on the horses that we've been seeing kind of on the regular here at Laurel. So, John, maybe we'll start with you. You've got some thoughts. I think Taj Mahal figures pretty prominently in your thoughts. Yeah, I think for the reasons I mentioned, Taj Mahal really moved head and shoulders above his Maryland brethren. Then we got a pair of horses for Gary Capuano in 2 and 3. A Hollywood Import, who's won 2 stakes, including the Spectacular Bid and a game effort of his own last time out. And Let's Go Lando, who gave Taj Mahal all he could handle. Certainly a no disgrace effort by him. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does next as well. Then Close the Gate, who've talked about a lot in the last 2 episodes, hasn't run a bad race in his 4-race career. Top Manipulator, who's number 5, is kind of my wild card horse. This Tim Keefe trainee, he's already 2 for 2 at the meet. He's won both races in I thought pretty a professional style. Made nice moves from off the pace both times. Got his test against winners last time out and wore down Worku B, who we'll actually see on Saturday, to win a first level allowance. And Top Manipulator is going to get a test of his own on Friday. 2 of the horses who he beat in his maiden win on January 16th, Belena Cash and Matthews Ticket are both entered. If both of them run well, I think it'll move up top manipulator stock quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the two recent stakes winners on top there, Taj Mahal and Hollywood Import, who's won 2 stakes. Mac, we've talked about Hollywood Import, how he was a deep closer, and then all of a sudden he was a speed horse. But what's your take? Is that look like your top 5? You have some different options.
A Hollywood Import, definitely. I'm not sure exactly where I want to place him in that top 5. To me, he's a contender. I mean, you have to go off of what he's been able to do here. A kind of wild card one for the Gary Capuano barn is Wild Warrior. I was a big fan of this one. If you go back to the allowance effort we saw December 14th, I was pretty high on him that day. He finished ahead of Bala de Plata and Let's Go Lando, going the 2 turns. For me, is one who I think he needs that distance. So we've seen him back on the 4th in Stakes Company. I just am waiting for him to get back to the 2 turns. I think he has some tactical ability, and I really liked the trip that he worked in December in that group. Obviously, Taj Mahal factors in here for me as well. We've seen 2 very different styled trips for him, and certainly signals that he's one who has some ability and can transfer that over the 2 turns distance. A little question mark for me with other horses having more routing experience. That's always going to be a factor, but he's been very fashionable in these 2 career starts, so it's hard to deny, his chances in that sense. But Code of Silence is the other one who, I'm starting to think specifically the 2 turns, who does that really suit? And I think John's right to bring up Top Manipulator. Haven't really seen enough of him yet. He's one who could be a little bit of a sleeper, but Code of Silence for me, just the 2 turns with a proper pace setup. I think it's been an uphill battle for him these last 2-3 outings, and that could really change things for him as an individual.
Yeah, I'm with you on Code of Silence. I feel like, and I've talked with Tim Keefe about him, the trainer. He's an immature horse at this point. You watch his races, he's not really engaged, then he's engaged, then he's not. But he came running at the end. He didn't run in the last race, but he ran in the Spectacular Bid and couldn't get out of the gate. And then he just seemed to be spinning his wheels. And then all of a sudden he kicked it in gear and he was running at the end. And I agree with you. I think he's the horse of the group that potentially, I think, the 2 turns moves up the most. So that, and the other thing, he's got his half brother tattooed, won $400,000 and a stake, but he didn't win that stake till he was 6 years old. So might be one that you want to keep an eye on as an older horse as well, but definitely want to see him. So pretty similar, but you're adding in a couple different twists as well. Any other thoughts that you guys have on sort of getting to the Preakness with this group of horses? What about, John, you had mentioned Close the Gate. I mean, one thing we saw with John Salzman Jr., the trainer of Close the Gate, a couple of years ago with Coffee with Chris, he had a horse that he kind of thought was a sprinter, but stretched out, did okay, stretched out, did okay. Took him to the Preakness. I never fault a guy for taking a shot with a horse that's doing well when the Preakness comes around and it's your local race. It's even different now because it'll be, for a lot of these guys, just walk out of the stall and onto the racetrack.
Especially because Close the Gate is Triple Crown nominated. Salzman and his crew did leave that door open. I mean, I wasn't thrilled with his effort last Saturday necessarily, but he came in 3rd. He's been hitting the board. He has not run an awful race just yet. I have to imagine that the private terms is next on his dance card. If he did okay at a mile, I think he'll do okay at a mile and a 16th. And incidentally, I think he was the only horse who ran in both the Spectacular Bid, which got rescheduled, I think at least once, and the Miracle Wood. So I think having those 2 stakes close together and all the cancellations that we've been having have thrown a lot of horses' race and training schedules off. Knock on wood, we'll have much better weather over the next few weeks, And then I think the Private Terms and the Beyond the Wire for the fillies is going to paint a truer picture of the 3-year-old scene.
Is that how you see it, Mac?
I do. Now, one thing I want to add is with Close the Gate, I think we take this past weekend with a grain of salt. He was adding ground in a race where the front end held well, and he looked like he was trying. And everyone looks good when they're winning, but when the rest is kind of, so if I'm looking at horses, I don't actually watch a lot of replays where they're winning. I watch a lot of replays where they're not winning. That's kind of my take, because I think you can get very excited for no particular reason if you go back and dig a little deeper. And he might be one of those where the front end just kind of held up there. Let's Go Lando tried to make a move. No one was going to get past those two horses. No one was really going to close the gap in that type of a setting. It's oftentimes we can maybe overlook that, and then that horse comes back and improves a lot next time out. It's certainly something that could change as well with the 2 turns and added distance. That's kind of my take with Hollywood Import as well, because we're going to have a different pace scenario. Sometimes, depending on how fields come up, that's a horse who maybe he'll end up with a perfect pocket trip, or maybe he'll have sprinter speed stretching out that he has to fend off for that first half a mile. And that's kind of my take, where I don't want to really look at Hollywood Import at a short price for, getting to the 2 turns and trying to work out that type of dynamic as we have these horses developing.
All right, that's going to do it for the news for this week. There's our top 5 3-year-old boys running at Laurel. Next week, we'll look at the 3-year-old girls and try and get a beat on who might show up in the Black-Eyed Susan. You guys return in a little while and do some handicapping for us. Right now, we're going to have our conversation with Jennifer Kelly. Happy to be joined here by author and historian Jennifer Kelly. Jennifer's written 2 books, Sir Barton and the Making of the Triple Crown, Foxes of Bel Air, about Gallant Fox, and Omaha. I'd do you one better, Jennifer Kelly. Why don't we do this? Oh,
yes, even better.
Look at that.
Hey, so pretty.
So Sir Barton, a Maryland horse, won that first sequence of races the first time it was called the Triple Crown, right?
It was 1919. It didn't really have a name then because nobody truly done it. The previous year, War Cloud became the first horse to run in all 3 of what we consider the Triple Crown races now. But in 1919, that feat didn't have a name. And honestly, people were more focused on the fact that he won the Derby and the Preakness, and the Belmont was sort of an ancillary, paper clipped on, hey, good job kind of accomplishment.
And you've also written Foxes of Bel Air about 2 other Maryland horses, Gallant Fox and Omaha. Pretty closely related other horses, in fact.
Yeah, sire and son, the only ones to do it. Gallant Fox won in 1930 and Omaha in 1935, and both are thoroughly Maryland horses, even though both were foaled in Kentucky. They are the product of Bel Air Stud, and if you live in Maryland, you can go visit Bel Air Stud, you can visit the stable, and then down the street you can visit the Bel Air Mansion, and that is where William Woodward would keep his racing stock in between seasons, or where he would send his yearlings. So he would breed at Claiborne Farm in Kentucky, and then he would bring them to Bel Air once they were weaned. And then even Omaha, when he was recovering from an injury in his 3-year-old season, he recovered at Bel Air Stud.
And it's a cool place to visit.
It is very cool. They had to kick me out. So that was pretty much like
that's the least surprising news ever.
Like, you're still here, we're closing.
And you got a 3rd book on the way about the sort of history and genesis of the Triple Crown.
Yeah, I've decided pretty much to make the Triple Crown my life's work, because it was the thing that got me into horse racing to begin with. But as we've continued to have discussions about whether or not we need to change the calendar, because Derby's for Saturday, May, 2 weeks is Preakness, 3 weeks is Belmont, and that 5-week schedule feels very condensed to a modern audience, or at least modern trainers. And before we go and start making changes and kind of throwing things at the wall to see what works, I thought maybe we should know how we got here. So the idea behind A Crown Most Splendid is to trace it from its origins of these three individual races and all of the socioeconomic, cultural, and other decisions that brought it to where it is now. And so, yes, that means covering a lot of ground, which is one of the reasons why it has taken me so long to make progress on it, because, anytime I start making progress, I run into this roadblock of I have to figure out where to find this information now, because I'm, trying to, get from point A to point B. So currently I'm in 1913, the early 1900s, trying to get to 1919. And so I'm actually writing about Maryland right now, and writing about the revival of Maryland Jockey Club, and when the Preakness came back to Pimlico. So that's where I'm stuck at the moment.
All right, a couple of years we'll have to wait
Yeah.
for that one, but
Yeah.
But again, Sir Barton and the Making of the Triple Crown, Foxes of Bel Air, 2 books about Triple Crown and Maryland horses. So good stuff there. Now, when I reached out to you to come on the podcast, we've known each other a few years and talked numerous times and whatever. But the first thing I was thinking of was the gigantic black-eyed Susan fascinator you had on at the Preakness last year.
Yes. Yes, that is. I don't do anything halfway. So if I'm gonna go, it was Preakness 150, and if I'm gonna be at Derby, if I'm gonna be at Preakness, I'm gonna go hold all the way. And so I found it was ridiculous. It was some very sunflower-esque fascinator that I just I have to wear this now. The fun part was getting it in the suitcase to fly from here to Maryland, and then to break it out at the racetrack. And people get a lot of attention for loud outfits, and I'm pretty sure that was
You got some.
I got some attention. And I just I'm like, if you're gonna be who I am and enjoy the Triple Crown as much as I do and love the sport as much as I do, you just gotta you can't just go halfway.
No half measures, says Jennifer Kelly. Now, I wanted to ask you, because I ask people this, and I've had conversations with people about this as sort of an outsider, in the sense of you're not from Maryland, you didn't grow up going to Pimlico, you haven't been going to it for years, and you're a historian, which gives it an interesting twist on the thing. Like, Jennifer, how do you experience Pimlico and the Preakness?
I love it. My husband was less thrilled with the facilities. He was not as impressed with how it looked by the time we went for the first time in 2017. But knowing the history of Maryland racing since colonial era onward, I love it. I love it. I've been to Derby several times. But Preakness is so chill compared to Derby, because Derby's a lot of fun, and there's a lot of activity going on. But I feel like Preakness is more Maryland. It's very much, we love our community, we love our racing, we're very proud of our heritage here, and we are nuts and bolts racing people, and that's one of the things I love most about it. The neighborhood's great. I just love the idea that when I stand on that apron, or if I get to walk out on the racetrack, that I know that every Triple Crown winner has competed there, and Man o' War has competed there, and like Seabiscuit and War, and I mean, there's just long line, and it's that oval, the building and all the surrounding area may have changed. That oval has not changed since 1873, if I'm not mistaken. So I just love standing there and going like, my dude, my guy, he, all of them ran there, because I have a picture of Sir Martin that's over my door. And so whenever I look up, I'm like, he was there, and so it just, that's why I love it so much. I just love being in Maryland. It's very much, you can tell that horse racing and horses are ingrained into the history of the state and still remain part of it I know that not all of Maryland's like that, but the areas that I've enjoyed the most have been very horsey. And it's nice to have that drive out the country life and you feel like you're sort of out in the rural area, but then 5 minutes down the road, there's Target. So it's nice to have that experience.
So really, it's all about the target. I got
Well,
it.
I know it's just a whole, like, living in an area like I do, it's the same. It's, it's very urban, suburban, and then you go 5 or 10 minutes down the road and suddenly it's cotton fields and cattle and things like that. So it's nice to be able to have that experience, but also have the amenities that make modern life go.
Right, sure. Now, you mentioned your husband not so thrilled with the state of the facilities. I mean, I first went to Pimlico dating myself a little over 30 years ago. And I remember walking in and thinking, this place has all the charm of a downtown bus terminal. And it, remarkably enough, got worse. I mean, the facilities were in pretty bad state of disrepair in latter years. But I think it's interesting that you say you love it, because I've had this conversation with a lot of people over the years who come from someplace else, come to Pimlico. And if you say, what do you think? They say, man, this place is a dump.
But it's
and then
dump.
They say, but I love it.
Yes.
And I think William Lee T. Moon, the author who wrote Blue Highways, which is just an absolutely fabulous book, wrote of trying to find, and this is a quote, places where time and men and deeds connected.
Love it.
And it's such a great line, but Pimlico is a place like that.
I feel like that is why, one of the reasons why I love it so much. And when I've talked to people about Pimlico this past year, when you and I were at Preakness for Preakness 150, and I would talk to people about the state of the facility and the upcoming changes, and people would say, yeah, it's a dump, but it's my dump. And they're very protective of it. And because it's that intersection of men and deeds and time, and just something that's very wholly that area. It did look like a bus terminal at some point, but also previous iterations of it was beautiful and classic, and it had that Victorian clubhouse, and I really wish we could have retained that identity. And so each iteration of Pimlico you get is a byproduct of the people that put their hands on it. But the oval itself, the land around it, the traditions that have grown up around it are a byproduct of everybody that has come along in Maryland racing from the very beginning, when you have the Tasker family and them importing Salima from the United States in like the 17th century and the 18th century, to now with the people like Josh Pons and everybody that works behind the scenes in Maryland to keep Maryland going. And I know there are other breeders in Maryland, but I know Josh and everybody comes to like really well. But I mean, Pimlico is a continuation of all of that, even if it does look like a Greyhound station that somebody forgot to close the door to. I mean, it's still it's yours. It's wholly yours. And then I've been to other racetracks. I've been to Saratoga. I've been to Santa Anita. I've been to Churchill Downs. I bet Churchill Downs still has areas where you can see the grandstand that was built in the late 19th century, because originally the grandstand was on the backstretch where there are barns now, and then they tore that down and rebuilt the grandstand with the twin spires. You can still walk through there and see all that. And that is what I liked about being able to go through Pimlico and walk through areas of Pimlico and be like, well, I know this is not the iteration of Pimlico that it would have been at this time, but it's like I felt the layers of history, and I just loved it. I just love that it was quintessentially Maryland. And so, and my husband's over here kind of turning his nose up at it, and I understand that impulse, but at the same time, like if you're a racing person and you know anything about the sport, walking into a place like that, you're like, I'm experiencing something that is a continuation of 200 years of tradition. You know, like I'm standing in a place that there any litany of people, anonymous and famous, have been. Like when we did the article about the people that are buried at Pimlico.
Yeah.
I was like, you know, those horses run over those people's like ashes, even though all the actual ashes are probably long gone. But I mean, like that's you don't get that many places.
Yeah. No, you wrote an article for the RacingBiz.com about the ghosts of Pimlico.
Yes,
and
I loved it so much. It was so much fun.
it was a great piece. You know, Chick Lang, his ashes were scattered there.
Yes.
There's a dog, Pimlico
Yes.
Barney, on the backstretch near the Preakness barn. You know, it's just that was a cool. It was a cool story. Now, one of the things, you know, it's interesting. Like, you know, some guy once said, you know, if you live long enough, you see everything. And we're actually living through that moment right now. And this year, we will live through the Preakness being run at Laurel with a crowd capped at 4,800.
Yeah.
And then the Belmont run at the wrong distance and the wrong racetrack at 1.25 miles at Saratoga. Put this in historical perspective for us. Like, to a modern racing fan, it feels like we're kind of at sea. Like the things we could count on, we can't even count on anymore. Put this in perspective for us.
Okay. Well, I will say that the Kentucky Derby is an anomaly. To have one event run continuously in the same location like that is rare. Not because, you know, someone's along the line has dropped the ball or something, you know, big has happened to change. It's just the nature of evolution is that, you know, you're going to have traditions that have had a multitude of identities. So the Belmont being run at Saratoga is not a new thing for them because it was run at Jerome Park first. Then they moved it to Belmont Park, and then when Belmont Park needed to be remodeled, they had it at Aqueduct, and then it came back to Belmont. And now that Belmont's in the midst of another, remodeling, they moved it to Saratoga, and then it'll come back. And so that's the nature of things with horse racing. It's just this ability to adapt and stay, relevant in this time period to be able to keep people's attention is really key. And so the Preakness has had a similar origin story where it started at Pimlico, and then when the Maryland Jockey Club lost its lease on Pimlico and closed, there was iterations of a race called Preakness, which I'm not entirely convinced is the actual Preakness, but maybe, that were run in New York at Morris Park and then Gravesend from like 1890 until 1904, thereabouts. And then it moved back to Pimlico in 1909. So even though racing had been at Pimlico since 1904, the actual Preakness didn't return to Pimlico until 1909. And then it's been continuously run at Pimlico since then until this year. Well, obviously it's going to be run at Laurel. But I mean, this is not new. And what's great about these events is that we still persist, even in light of impediments like, we need a whole new racetrack. Our bad. Let's do, let's put it over here for a couple of years until we get a whole new racetrack, and then we'll move it back. And so it's like, at least it's continuing, and they didn't just go like, chuck the towel and be like, we just won't run it this year because it's not at the right racetrack. It's like, yeah. Right. Same with, I mean, if you look at, I think the Phoenix Hotel Stakes is one of the longest running stakes race in the United States, and I think it started at the Kentucky Association Racetrack in Lexington in like 1830 something, and It's still run at Keeneland. But Keeneland's only had it since 1936-37 when the racetrack opened. But for this chunk of time prior to that, it was run at a completely different racetrack. But they kept it alive, and they run it at Keeneland now. And same with Preakness, and same with Belmont. So it's just I think it's a testament to our ability to adapt and to hold fast to tradition.
Well, I want to deal with that in a minute, but I want to go back to something you said about like races called the Preakness, but you're not
Mhm.
told were the Preakness, and possibly I'm about to open up a can of worms here, but I what do you mean?
Okay, so in the 1940s, a public relations person that worked for Pimlico discovered the lost Preaknesses, which were iterations of the race that were run in New York at Morris Park and then Gravesend, I believe. And you caught me on a day where I've got too much data in my head, but
Sorry.
it happens. It's fine. It's just me. Like I should have checked up on it, but those were not counted in the original, runnings of the race.
For the Preakness.
So, it was run from 1873 until 1890, 1889 at Pimlico, and then there was an interruption, and then it picked back up in 1909. So I've got several books where they start counting the Preakness either from 1909 on, or they start counting the Preakness from 1873, and then they don't have that, interrupted period. And then, so when this gentleman found the lost Preaknesses that were run in New York, the Maryland Jockey Club decided we're going to make this part of the history of the race, which is great. Mm-hmm. I think it's great. The problem is, and the reason why I hesitate is because there was a stable named the Preakness Stable running at the same time in New Jersey. So this was Milton Sanford, who had a stud in New Jersey called Preakness. He, named for the horse Preakness, that was the race was named after, and that is a derivation of a native name for the area, which is Preakness or something like that, which I'm totally murdering because I am not native. So like when I see those Preaknesses, like I suspect that they probably are a continuation of the Preakness that was run in Maryland, but I don't have enough evidence yet to say that the person who decided to add the Preakness to the stakes calendar at these racetracks in New York was like thoughtfully continuing what had already started in Maryland. So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That is why I'm writing A Crown Most Splendid, because I want to, as definitively as I can, solve this issue, so that we can say with some sort of certainty that this is definitely, because it was also not just run as a stakes, it was run as a handicap more than once. It was run with older horses. So it had different conditions other than just a 3-year-old stake, at a mile and an 8. It was run at a mile and 8 for a long time. Now it's a mile and 3/16. That happened in the 20s. That's a whole other can of worms. I'm still trying to figure out, like, why in the middle of the 1920s the Maryland Jockey Club decided to add an extra 16th of a mile to the race. So, like, I have not been able to find good, reliable information other than we just decided to, and like, but why? I feel like the Preakness has had this redheaded stepchild mentality of we want to compete with Derby, so we're gonna we're gonna do everything to compete with Derby, so we're gonna make our race more classic by extending it. So they added, but they don't make it a mile and a quarter. We're gonna make almost as long, and it was just this is what keeps me up at night, is trying to figure this stuff out, because I really want I want to introduce as much accurate information into the record as possible, so that when we are making decisions, we're making decisions with the best information that we have. So hopefully that answered your question, Frank.
I can't even remember the question.
It was about the Preaknesses, like the lost Preaknesses, and the origin of that. But yeah, that's why I want to know more. So one of the things that I have on my list of questions when I go to the Keeneland Library next and spend an ungodly amount of time in the stacks is, can I go through newspapers and other materials from that time and have some sort of definitive answer to, is this the Preakness, as in the one that originated in Maryland at Pimlico, or is this the Preakness, a race that we just decided to name after the stable that's prominent and has been running in that area for X number of years? So.
Right. There's actually, although it's pronounced in New Jersey, it's generally pronounced Preakness. more of an A than an E, and
Yeah.
there's a section of Patterson and a park in Preakness Park.
That's the same. That's the very area that I'm talking about. That's where the farm was. So, you know, he named it after that area of New Jersey, and so I was like, that's not confusing at all when it comes to doing all this kind of work.
Right. So the only constant I think you're saying has been change, really. Like we experience it, and I've had this conversation with people, and you know, you talk about like the how many weeks between the Derby and the Preakness, and people are like, "What's tradition? We can't change that." It's 1969 where they arrived there. This is not like, you know, the stone tablets on the mountain.
No, it's not. It's not. It's really not. And that's the thing that I think kicked off my obsession with doing this book, was that I one day realized that the 5 weeks has not been a constant, and it's not been a constant for a whole lot longer than we assumed, because you'll see in history books, like there was from 1923 to 1931, the Preakness was run before the Derby, and you see that little asterisk in there. No one ever explains why.
Years? So it's like 8 years? Oh, wow. I didn't know that. I thought it was like once or twice. That's interesting.
No, it was like almost a full decade. And, you know, well, no one ever really explains why. It was like, I know why, but I'm the person that stands in the back of the tour, because the tour guide is going to be mad if I start, you know, like talking about the stuff that I know, because I know more than they do. And I'm like, really sorry. But it's, you know, that kind of question, oh my gosh, this was not run in, like, I grew up in, you know, the 80s, started watching horse racing in the 80s, and I'm like, dude, first Saturday in May, Derby, 2 weeks later, Preakness, 3 weeks later, Belmont. It was ingrained in my brain. And if you're a modern racing fan, it's almost like it's, you know, it is like it's been on the stone tablets until you start digging into the history. And, you know, when I was writing the first book, when I was writing about Sir Barton, there was only 4 days. Like, he won that race in the afternoon. They cooled him out, chilled him out for a bit, put him on a train at midnight, and he was headed toward Baltimore, and it wasn't even 24 hours since that horse had crossed that finish line, and they were already trucking it toward Baltimore to be in the Preakness, which was 4 days later. And of course, he's going by train, so it's not like, you know, a couple of hours on the plane, and then you start here and you land here, and it's the same day. You know, it took him a couple of days to get there. So by the time, you know, if he wanted to run in both races, he was going to have to book it. So when you think about that, and you think about, well, the following year when Man of War ran, it was 8 days. And then when you start looking at scheduling and how it, and then in 1922, when they were on the same day, and everybody,
that would have been quite a triple crown to win.
I read a whole article about that for Blood Horse. That was quite an adventure in seeing people complain through column inches about decisions that other people made. Like, you need to think more about the horsemen, because they want to run their horses the best races. And, you know, the people like in charge of Maryland, the people in charge of Kentucky are like, no. So that's why you had the Preakness, you know, run before the Derby. And it was like the Preakness was run on the last day of Pimlico's spring meet. And the Derby was run on the first day of Churchill Downs spring meet. And it used to be that was fine, because, you know, Churchill opened in the middle of the month, and, you know, Pimlico ended toward the beginning of the month, and then suddenly they started changing out their dates, and it starts creeping closer together, and people get really concerned. And so even as late as 1955, I'll say also 1959. 1955, I found an article where Swaps's owner complained about the 3 weeks between the Derby and Preakness because it was too long. And Swaps is based in California, so his owner is basically said, I have to leave the horse in the East Coast, and he doesn't have anywhere to run, or something of that nature.
For 3 weeks, yeah.
Okay, so Swaps ended up not running in the Preakness, and that was the year that Nashua won the Preakness of the Belmont. And then in 1959, Sword Dancer was second by a nose in the Derby to Tommy Lee, and then ran a month later. Wait, was it a month? No, that was in between Preakness and Belmont. There was a month between the Preakness and the Belmont that year. So Sword Dancer was second in the Preakness, and then was going to run in the Belmont, but it was 4 weeks later. And so, like, Elliot Birch ran him in the Met Mile in between,
Sure.
just because the horse needed a start. And it's like such a different mentality than we have now. And even the 5 weeks is like pushing incredulity for people. Like, oh my God, so close together. I'm like, dude.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
it used to be like, I mean, as you know, like the Derby trial was actually like a race you'd run in, and then a week later you'd run in the Derby. Now it's of course inconceivable. Now they're running
yeah.
the same day under a different name.
Well, the Pat Day Mile now, but like the Derby trial, I mean, there are Derby winners that ran in the Derby trial, like, you know, earlier in the week, and then turned around and ran, you know, won the Derby. It's just like, but that also is a testament to how the sport has evolved. And you know, you can critique why people have the attitudes that we have now. There's lots of reasons why they do. But the thing about horse racing is that it loves its traditions. It also loves to pretend that those traditions have been around longer than they have.
They're timeless and unchanging. Yes.
And I'm just like, but you were right when you said the thing about horse racing is that the only constant is change. And I think that's true of any sort of human endeavor, is that you have to you have to account for change. And when people don't account for change, it makes that inflexibility becomes problematic the longer it goes on. So I'm like, look, I'm a traditionalist. I'm like, dude, I want my Derby 2 weeks, Preakness 3 weeks, Belmont. Like, I want to keep that because that's what I grew up with. But I'm also not insensible to the idea that maybe we would benefit from it.
Definitely true. Now, I want to get back to Pimlico for a minute. I mean, and you wrote about this. You wrote a different article for the RacingBiz.com called "Pimlico Persists," and one of the things that's interesting about Pimlico is, as you mentioned, it opened, then it closed, then it reopened. Then I think it was the 50s or 60s. The owners tried to transfer the days to Laurel, which failed by a single vote in the legislature. And then just in 2019, the Stronach Group was pushing they wanted to make Laurel a quote unquote super track. And the unspoken part of that was they were going to let Pimlico basically, you know, demolition by neglect sort of thing, because they wanted to move everything to Laurel. And then that got, so it is a racetrack that has hung on at times by the, you know, skin of its teeth.
Yeah, Pimlico, I don't know how. I mean, I honestly don't, because it's amazing. Maybe it's just the universe decided that the locus of Maryland racing needs to be there at that particular, you know, juncture in Baltimore. Maybe it's all the horses that have come before that are just protesting the idea that, you know, you would pave over this racetrack that all these, you know, greats have trod and just put like some houses on top of it. Like, oh, how very uninteresting is that? Right. So I don't know. Maybe it's that Baltimore has such a, you know, investment in that as part of the identity of the area that, you know, they just, it's hard. It's like Saratoga. Like, I don't think you could ever have racing leave Saratoga. I don't think you could ever have racing leave Pimlico.
And, you know, there were proposals, I'm sure you know, to close Saratoga down.
Oh yeah, there's been like,
yeah.
Oh yeah, shoot, people have been trying to close, you know, racetracks and other things for years. You know, like you go to Santa Anita and it's built next to a mall, and I was like, hey, the parking lot for the racetrack is shared with a mall. That's new. You know, so it's like, I guess there's enough people invested in the fact that the place exists and that it has persisted for as long as it has, and that it's so tied to what people feel like that area is, that it's just not going to go away. And I think that's great. I mean, honestly, I live in an area of northern Alabama where there's constant development. There's constant, you know, people moving in, and there's constant change. And change is not bad, but it is nice to have things that you can hold fast to as part of your identity. And, you know, Baltimore is changing, and, you know, and people really do want to keep those constants right there, to know that, you know, I can go to Pimlico and maybe I'm going for the infield fest with the music or maybe I'm going to watch the races, but I know it's going to be there, and they like that. And that's why I think Pimlico is persistent, because it's been there for so long. Oh my gosh, it's like 150 something years old. Like, people
not a
don't
young
know it.
track.
It's not, and the same with Churchill Downs. It's the same with Saratoga. I mean, they've been there for so long that people get really possessive about things.
Yeah. No, it's actually, I mean, you talk to people in Baltimore who've been around a while, and they'll tell you, I mean, one of the things that, makes people want to keep Pimlico is Baltimore has a, kind of a checkered sports history. It was supposed to get an NHL team and didn't. And then the Colts left in the middle of the night, and the Bullets left, and or now the Wizards, but there's this sort of history of losing sporting things, and so it becomes more important to keep kind of what's still there.
Yeah, because I mean, you do see like the Oilers folding up and moving to Nashville and to become the Titans, and then now Houston has a football team again. But the infamy of the Baltimore Colts just locking the door and like driving away in the middle of the night, like I don't blame them for wanting to hang on to Pimlico like that, because I mean it's tough. It's tough, and they love to have their thing that I live in Baltimore. and the Orioles are over here at Camden Yard. And every year I know that Pimlico is going to open, and even though it looks like a Greyhound bus station for now, it's still mine.
All right.
It's my Greyhound bus station. And people know that, when they are done at Derby, they're going to turn around and drive to Baltimore, and they're going to get some crab cakes, and they're going to walk into the racetrack, and they're going to say, this place is a dump, but it's my dump. And hopefully it'll be a brand new, sparkling, mecca for racing. And so, I look forward to that.
That's what I want to ask you. So you're not coming to Laurel this year for the Preakness. So the next time you come to the Preakness, hopefully, if all goes to plan, and almost nothing in this plan has gone to plan, but hopefully it will be in a brand new Pimlico. How do you think you'll feel about that?
As long as the racing surface is still there, I'm good.
Okay.
Honestly, Frank, I resist the sentimentality expressing it to people openly, but I cried the first time I went to Pimlico, because I knew I was there where all these horses had run. And I regularly get emotional when I go to a place like Pimlico or Churchill or Saratoga, because I'm like, those places, the ground, I'm stepping on the racetrack, like I know it's not the same dirt because I'm not dumb, and I know it's not the same even foundation, because the racetrack itself has a foundation, but that ground has been trod by so many horses and so many people for since 1870. So that's 156 years. And so this is my hope for the new Pimlico, that they take that Victorian clubhouse design from the original clubhouse, or not the original clubhouse, but those photos from the one that built
the historic one that burned down in the 60s. Yeah.
I hope that becomes part of it, because I feel like that was such an integral part of the identity of the racetrack. And I really want to walk up into a place that has a little bit of the old and the new in it, so that when you walk up in there, you understand the historic, but you also appreciate the continuity and the fact that there is more to come. That is what I'm looking forward to. I was looking forward to driving up, and the people in the neighborhoods surrounding it. When I was driving in for Preakness last year, I waved to everybody that was out. They all waved back. They were all so happy to see us that we were there. They were selling bottles of water, and I'm like, hey, I'm good, And I think they look forward to it too. I think they look forward to the continuity, and they look forward to something new.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to a lot of things about a new Pimlico, some of which I can't say on broadcast, but I'm really looking forward to just walking out of that racetrack again and knowing that Sir Barton and Gallup Fox and Omaha and Secretariat and Sunday Silence and all these horses that I have loved. I was born the year that Seattle Slew won the Triple Crown, and I feel like that is pretty much apropos for me. So I really look forward to New Pimlico. You know, I don't want to go to Laurel, not just because I don't want to go to Laurel. I just don't have the money. But you know, it's also like I'm good. Like I want to come back to Pimlico. I was there for Preakness 150. I was there for the last one, and I would like to be there for the first one back, so that I can welcome the Preakness back to its home.
So the first one back is supposed to be next year, but the grandstand will not be open.
We'll see.
So the first one with an operational grandstand is supposed to be 2 years, 28. So, so as long as there's a place for the ghosts, you'll be good.
As long as there's a place for me to set up my laptop and for me to not get rained on, I'm good. If I can leave my purse, I'm good.
How can people catch up with Jennifer Kelly? Got a website?
Yes, I have a website, such as it is. It is Jennifer Kelly Writes, WRITES.com. It is mostly a landing page. You can sign up for my newsletter there. I have a newsletter called Writers Up. And I put that out monthly. Actually, my calendar reminded me today that I'm supposed to be drafting my February newsletter, which I'm like, yay. I got to do that. I'm working on the book. I'm working on Crown. If I may shill for the other project, I was part of this book. I did a couple of chapters in Racetracks of America, which you can buy through the National Museum of Racing. And Pimlico is in here.
Yay.
As is, you know, Laurel and Havre de Grace, stuff like that. And then I have the newsletter. I contribute to America's Best Racing and Twin Spires. You can see me on there. I'm usually on social media acting like a fool. You know, doing horsey things. Occasionally I get to write for you again. So if you need me again, you know, I'm always happy to work with you.
Absolutely.
Generally you will see
Look to hear from me soon.
Yes, I hope so. And I will be at Derby. Apparently I'm in the movie that airs in the Kentucky Derby Museum. They have a little movie that runs in the middle, and my friends went, they're like, did you know you're in the movie? No. Do you want to be in the movie? No, I do not. So, but that's where you can find me. You can definitely find me at the Sir Barton on social media. On pretty much every social media page. And Frank knows where to find me. I'm pretty much like, oh, do you want to be on the pod? Yes. Did you need to ask? No. Just tell me where to be. Tell me when to show up. I'm there.
All right, Jennifer Kelly, thank you so much for giving us a little historical perspective on this very strange moment we're living in horse racing world right now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Frank.
All right, we bring back John and Mackenzie here, do a little handicapping for the weekend races. You don't need me for this, so I will turn it over to the two of you, and I'll catch you on the other side.
Thank you, Frank. Now, that's a lot of confidence he puts in us saying we don't need him for this, because actually, this one-turn mile on Friday in race 7 is going to be our feature, and I actually think it's kind of an interesting race, John. 6-horse field, a lot of improving types, kind of ones you're waiting to watch, and then some transferring back in. Who do you like in here?
It's very interesting because this is basically a rematch of the same race at this condition on February 5th. Out of the 6 horses in here, 4 of them raced that day. Feeling Woozy won that afternoon by 1 3/4 lengths, and he's back in here. I think he merits respect, but he has such in and out form. I really can't trust him to run his best race. One horse who, as you alluded to, is in improving form is number 3, Indy Charges On, for Anthony Ferrier, who has really found his best self since getting claimed by Ferrier back in September at Churchill Downs. He's 3 or 4 on this track. The only time he lost was when he came in second to McLean's Rook, who turned in just a freakish effort that afternoon. And he got his revenge against McLean's Rook last time out in a second level allowance back on February 12th. He got a good trip off the pace that day, picking this up on the far turn. He's making his move in the 3 path, and McLean's Rook, who had run just gigantic races in his previous 3 starts. As you can see, he was 3-5 that day. He's trying to make a move at Indy Chardizan, but Indy Chardizan is holding sway. He opens up on him in the stretch. Neither McLean's Rook nor Certified Loverboy, who we'll get to later on, made much of a dent that afternoon. It was a big class test for Indy Chardizan, toughest field he had seen so far in his career, and he passed it with flying colors. I figure that Feeling Woozy is going to set the pace, and if he backs up again, as he is wont to do, I think Indy Chardizan will blow the field away.
I agree. Now, it's interesting because when we saw Indy Chardizan rematch with McLean's Rook, very different as far as the pace setup goes. Indy Chardizan was just doing tons early on in that 3-back effort, but then last time out, I loved the trip, and I think just showed exactly where this horse kind of is as far as maturity and level goes. Now, I also go with the 5 in my exacta, Feeling Woozy, because such a different trip last time out. He looked incredibly good doing it. Do you think he can repeat that again, or is he just spotty as far as form goes?
Certainly possible. I just don't know if he will. One thing that is encouraging about his last win, though, is that in the past, he was only able to run well when he had the early lead. If he did not make a clear early lead, he was in big trouble. Last time out, he came from off the pace, had about 2.5 lengths out of it early, and still had plenty left in the tank. It's possible that Jamie Ness has cracked the code on him, and he can run well all the time, no matter what kind of trip he gets. That being said, I imagine he's going to be the favorite. We don't have morning lines yet as of this recording, but based on that win last time out, I imagine Feeling Woozy is going to be favored. If he's as big of a favorite as I think he's going to be, I don't think that you could take that kind of price on him.
I agree. Now, the interesting thing about that last outing, I felt like all of the horses in that race, you had only 2 of them who were real closers. The others were all horses who dirt routers wanted the front end. And Feeling Woozy had yet to show us that he had the ability to do it any other way. So I'd written him off a little bit. He paid a great price. But, it's interesting to see we have a few of those horses coming back in here this time. Pay Billy is one of those who, 2 starts off the bench, both stakes company. Then he comes back, makes a nice effort in that allowance. Do you think we see another step forward here?
I do, but I just don't know how big it's going to be. And Pay Billy was the darling of the Tessio Trail last year. He won the Tessio, won the private turns, just missed in the Miracle Wood. But clearly there's a lot of ability there. But he's taken slow, incremental improvements in each of his 3 starts off the bench. Now he has run into some very tough rivals. 2 starts back at Manfiuso, he lost a post time and a Birdian runner, but he got a similarly good trip that Feeling Woozy got in that February 5th race, and he was not able to capitalize as well. He ended up second. Of course, he could take another step forward, 4th off the layoff, but that left me a bit cold on him in comparison to Feeling Woozy. So I picked him 3rd. I think that's fair. I think that's where he's going to end up at the end.
I agree with you completely. And one thing that stands out on him, lifetime top buyer 85. We saw that back in the Tessio in April. So as a 3-year-old, right? And now these last 2 efforts both have been 84 buyers. So we're kind of sitting on where we previously seen his best be. I think it's reasonable. We went off the favorite last time out. It seems reasonable to ask, for a little bit of value there if you're going to, maybe don't take that horse at a short price here. Now, we'll dive into the feature for Saturday. That's going to come in race 8. Pretty fun for the 3-year-olds going at 5.5. I've picked this race apart a few different ways. Seems like there are a lot of ways you can go here with horses coming in off the bench. How much does the 5.5 distance really impact things for you overall, though?
Not terribly compared to a 6-furlong race. There is a lot of speed in here, so it kind of balances itself out in that way, because on one hand there's a lot of speed, so they might boon each other up. On the other hand, because of the shorter distance, closers might be at a bit of a disadvantage. So I think it ends up being kind of a wash, and I'm just looking at who's the best towards it and who looks the best going in.
Okay, now where do you land with overall? You're saying just pick the best horse in here. Who is that for you?
So I picked number 4, Cairo Surprise on top. This is a Jersey bred for Hope Jones, who I'm very high on, and I really liked his last effort in the South Mountain Stakes at Penn National back on November 26th. We don't have a replay of that race, but rest assured it was a huge effort. He battled for the early lead with long shot bootleg runner, got an opening quarter over a very sloppy track in 21 and 4/5 seconds. That was by far the fastest opening quarter at that distance that evening. He opened up on bootleg runner at the top of the stretch, looked like he was going to put him away. Gave tough guy Tony, the favorite, who got just a perfect trip off that duel. A decent fight in the stretch. Ended up kind of drifting out late, lost by a length. Cowlinch gave him a bit of time off after that race. He came back to the work tab in early February, and he's just been getting better with each workout, including a bullet drill last Friday at Fair Hill. Now, he is going to get some pace competition, at least to his outside, in Prince of Darkness and Worker B, Bud's Notion, who we'll talk about in a bit. Went gate to wire a while back. The big lap on the inside also showed some speed when he broke his maiden at Timonium, but Cairo Surprise does have the best early pace figures in this field. I think if he's on his game, he'll be able to outrun them early and turn in a big effort in his 2026 debut.
I agree with you completely. I mean, I really do look at him as the speed of the speed in here. He's shown it in all 4 of those career starts. The 5.5 leans his direction perhaps a little bit. He also comes in first time gelding, adds Lasix in here. So everything kind of lining up. I like the work tab that we've been seeing. You mentioned that as well. And, interesting, we saw him on the work tab December 13th and then just a little bit of a break until February 4th. But they've been able to get 3 really consistent pieces in there. Makes you wonder, perhaps it was just weather related and they couldn't quite get a surface that they felt it was worth really going out for morning pieces. And they decide to just keep this one fresh and bring him back here. The bullet last time out on the 21st certainly signals he should be picking up where he left off. Now, you mentioned the other speed in here. One who I'm curious what you think about is Bud's Notion on the outside. We've only seen him once. He was forward. Do you think he necessarily needs the lead, or is this one who might utilize that outside post today?
I think he should not go to the front necessarily. Watching him break his maiden in gate to wire fashion at Delaware Park in September, and this kind of situation is obviously apples and oranges compared to what he's dealing with on Saturday. He was one of the favorites in this spot, made the rail and the lead without much trouble. Not going to be able to do so on Saturday. So I do think he could work out a nice trip just off the pace. And as this race showed, he has a ton of upside. He kicked away nicely in the stretch, won by 5.5 lengths, as much the best. Power Grid, who was second, came back to win his next 2 starts. This one may have been pointing for the Maryland Million nursery, one of the sidelines right before that race. It has not been seen since. But he has been working well since early January, working especially well as of late. I mean, last Thursday, he went 4 furlongs in 47 and 3/5 seconds at Laurel. That was the fastest of 30 times at the distance that day. Among the horses he outworked are Celtic Contender, a multiple stakes winner, and Lonesome Road, who has turned heads in his 2 dirt starts at this meet. Well, that was a bona fide bullet workout. He really impressed in the morning. I think he's sitting on a huge effort, and he may be one, along with a top choice, Cairo Sunrise, who we're talking about as Tessio contenders by this time next week.
Right. And this is one who, for me, I actually use Bud's Notion on top because you mentioned Power Grid. That's a horse who he was also coming out of very good company. He finished second by less than a length in the Hickory Tree to Trendsetter, who's a horse we've seen improving before he went on and finished second here to Bud's Notion. So really solid 1-2 finishers in there. I think it definitely gives you a little bit of confidence. And you mentioned the Maryland Million. I believe he was one who was entered in maybe a scratch on that particular day.
It sounds right now. I'm thinking about it again.
Yes. So, interesting race. The outer post, though, is kind of what makes me feel like maybe we have some options with this one. But second time back, there are a lot of horses who have a bit more experience in here than he does. And one of those is Our Day Will Come. This is a horse I think we have to talk about because he's won his last 3 outings in a row. Now he arrives second time Lasix here today.
Yeah, I mean, it's not every day that you see a horse who's already won 5 races before March of the 3-year-old season, but that is the case with Our Day Will Come. He's won 3 times in a row, all of them at the $40,000 claiming level, all of them with similar stalk and pounce trips. I mean, he has gotten very nice setups in all of those races, but with all the speed here, he might get another good trip, and that might make up any class deficit he might have compared to these.
I agree with you. Now, some question for me. I think he does like to kind of have contact with the field, but the inner post, maybe that will help him. He doesn't necessarily seem to mind where he is doing the work from, but seems rateable enough and rideable enough that he can work various different types of trips. So they're just going to go a little bit quicker early than he's necessarily done yet. As you mentioned, though, interesting group for these 3-year-olds. We'll see. Maybe we see some of them entertain the idea of stretching out later on. Sunday, we have that 8-race card, and look at the feature in race 7, going 1 1/8 miles. I always love this distance. A lot can happen, and sometimes you find a horse who you can really key around because it suits them just that well. Do you have anyone that checks that box for you here?
My top choice here is number 3, Certified Lover Boy, and I do think we have to keep an eye on what Indy Chardizan does on Friday in relation to Sunday's race, because if Indy Chardizan runs well, I think it makes Certified Lover Boy look that much better. We're looking at his race 2 starts back on January 17th, and I remember going into this race, the only way Certified Lover Boy can win is if he gets an easy lead, because in the past, when he makes the front, he runs well. When he's forced to come from just off the pace, not so much. And when I saw that opening half mile in 48 and change, I knew it was over. There was no shot anyone was going to catch him. He ended up getting disqualified on this day because he interfered with national law coming out of the gate. National law ended up coming in second and was elevated to first. So Certified Lover Boy got to stay at this level. Next time out, he was forced into setting a faster pace that afternoon, ended up third behind the aforementioned Indy Chardizan and McLean's Rook. We saw that race earlier, but there's no one in here nearly at the quality of Indy Chardizan or McLean's Rook, and Certified Lover Boy finished 1 3/4 lengths clear of all the others. So even though it's not a class drop, technically, I think it is much so in actuality. I think he has a very easy time on the front end and just keeps going.
Right. Now, you saw Omaha, a true closer who looked to really be relishing that trip. Now, no one else really was able to kind of close the gap or make anything happen there. But I really liked that we saw that horse solidify things coming back in the last outing. I am with you, though. Once we went into the first turn or halfway down the backside, he had his ears pricked, and I kind of thought that was game over for him. Now tell me, the 2 horse in here, Hagrid's Flame, a horse who's maybe didn't run his best race last time out, but comes back to Laurel, adds blinkers here for the first time in his career. Is he one who maybe is going to benefit from the pace setup?
I think he has a lot of upside. I mean, he took advantage of a nice pace setup on this track back in mid-November, sat off the pace towards the inside and kicked away to win nicely over, among others, National Law in his first start off of just over a 7-month layoff. He's been holding his own against these types both here and at Parks and Aqueduct. In his last start here, he was second behind Worcester, who we all know just adores this track. He was well beaten last time out at Aqueduct. Regressed on the Brisnet scale down to an 80, but I think he'll do much better coming back to his home base and adding blinkers and getting Martin Chouan back aboard, who has done well with him in the past.
Absolutely. Now, he's one who I'll be curious what kind of price we end up getting, but I do think that Parks effort, a really solid group in there as well. He's maybe just a horse who he needs every bit of this distance and a little bit of help. Another one who I'm curious your take on the outside, Take the Pledge. Cal Lynch sends this one out first start off of the bench. I think he needs the pace setup, but I think he is a really nice horse. Do you suspect he gets it in here today?
I do not. I think that Certified Lover Boy is just going to kind of walk on the lead, and that's going to make things tougher for both Take the Pledge and the 5. Excellent start coming in from Charlestown, who has a similar deep closing style. So I'm really looking at those two relative to the other 4 rivals. Like taking Certified Lover Boy as his own horse, assuming he goes gate to wire. How will the other 6 do? And if, say, the 2nd or 3rd place horse early on tires, would that set it up well for Take the Pledge and or Excellent Start? I think it does. I mean, Take the Pledge has run very well at Penn National, came from way off the pace to win 3 out of his last 4 starts there. He has won from off of mild fractions in the past, so unless it's just dawdlingly slow in 2nd place, I don't think that'll be too much of a burden for him. Of course, he is coming off that long break. I think Cairo Surprise's effort on Saturday is going to give us some clues into how Take the Pledge is going to do on Sunday. It's another Kyle Lynch trainee coming off of not as long a layoff, but still a decent sized break. I think if Cairo Surprise runs well and moves up Take the Pledge's stock just a little bit.
I agree. And he's one who I'm going to price shop if there's anything sort of reasonable. He's one who maybe I just go ahead and bet across the board or throw into those exactas. But Certified Lover Boy, likely one who takes a bit of play, as well as Hagrid's Flame in there. Should we bring Frank back, see if he has any other opinions on this card?
I think we should. I'm curious as to his takes. That's why he's here. He has good opinions.
We need a bell.
That's a ding, ding, ding. Come back. Great job, guys. Lots of insights there. Appreciate the work that you guys do to prepare for these cards. I have no thoughts at all because I have not yet gotten to looking at the cards. So that's why I turn it over to you. You guys are.
I hope everyone has fun.
What's that?
You just hope everyone has fun.
That's it.
He's more worried about the dogs and their anxiety today. With the
I am more worried about the dogs and their anxiety today. Actually, the girl dog has like certain places that she's decided, like if she's on a chair, it's safe and everything's okay. If she's in her crate, it's safe and everything's okay.
Right.
Everywhere else, not so much. So when the cleaning lady showed up, she's just like, I don't know what's going on here. I'm running straight to the crate and I'll just sit there. So, yeah, it's, when you adopt dogs from the shelter, you get stuff. And, but you hope that eventually they overcome the stuff and then you have a great dog. So that's what we're working on right now. But anyway, thanks so much, guys. Great job. Thanks everybody. Maryland Racing today. We appreciate you checking in. We appreciate Jennifer Kelly for joining us earlier on, and we'll do this again in a week. Sound good to you guys?
Can't wait. Hopefully there's not as much snow on the ground by the time we do that podcast.
Well, you know what? Maybe next week you could give out the Golden Shovel Award. We'll have to figure out what that's for, but we'll give it.
Good idea.
All right. Thanks, everybody.